You know that elaborate, high-effort mask you wear in public, the compliant, people-pleasing persona? Well, it was not built to deceive others. It was built by your survival system to protect your vulnerable true self from what it feared would be emotional annihilation. Today, we're going to show you the immense neurological cost of this facade and how you can start to reunite with your authentic self. So right there, that's the central paradox we're going to unpack. The person you present to the world, the one that's so carefully constructed, it's not a lie. And it's definitely not a character flaw. It's a shield. Think of it like a sophisticated piece of psychological armor your brain built probably a long time ago to protect your most authentic, vulnerable core from what it saw as a huge threat: rejection. We're going to get into the massive cost of wearing this mask and, more importantly, how to begin to safely take it off. All right, here's our roadmap for this whole journey. First, we'll talk about the mask of survival. Then we'll get into the high cost of hiding. After that, we'll map out the emotional labor loop and understand your brain's survival logic. And then the good part, the path to authenticity. And finally, we'll end with a call to courage. Okay, let's start by changing our relationship with this mask. I know for a lot of us, it's a source of shame, right? This feeling of being an imposter. But what if we could see it not as some kind of personal fault, but as a story of incredible resilience? Here's the most crucial point to get. This false self gets created when our environment, especially when we're young, sends us the message that our real emotional needs are inconvenient or unacceptable or maybe even dangerous. And to get that connection and belonging, which for a kid are just as important as food and water, we learn to push down our true self and show up as someone more, well, compliant and agreeable. So this isn't a flaw in your character. It was a brilliant, unconscious adaptation to a really challenging environment. So, while that adaptation was brilliant for survival back then, it really wasn't designed for the long haul. Keeping it up into adulthood comes with this enormous cost, one that so many of us feel every single day as this deep, unshakable exhaustion that no amount of sleep seems to fix. Do any of these sound familiar to you? That constant emotional exhaustion, the chronic people-pleasing, that nagging voice of imposter syndrome, or maybe that fear of being found out, that feeling of being disconnected or just an inner emptiness. You know, this isn't just a random list of symptoms. It's the totally predictable result of living out of alignment with who you really are, the imposter syndrome. That comes from knowing deep down that the praise you're getting is for the mask, not for the real you. And that feeling of emptiness, well, that's your true self literally being starved of expression. And the exhaustion, that's the massive energy bill for running this high-effort performance 24/7. Now let's look at the core conflict here. On one side, you've got your true self. It's spontaneous, it can be messy, it's authentic. It's who you are when nobody's watching. And then on the other side, you have the false self. It's curated, it's compliant, and it's totally optimized to get approval from the outside. The real struggle, the source of all that exhaustion, comes from the huge gap between these two and the constant vigilant effort it takes to police that border, to make sure the wrong parts don't accidentally slip out. And look, this isn't just a metaphor. It's a real, measurable neurological event. The part of your brain that's in charge of things like self-control and decision-making, that's the prefrontal cortex, or PFC, is doing all the heavy lifting. Every single time you bite your tongue when you really want to speak up, or you force a smile when you feel awful, or you just suppress a genuine feeling to keep the peace, your PFC is burning through massive amounts of cognitive fuel. That burnout has a name: ego depletion. It is not a sign of weakness. It's the real metabolic cost of wearing your mask. So how does this incredibly draining system actually work? Well, it's not random at all. It's a highly structured, self-reinforcing loop. Let's pop the hood and map out the engine that drives this constant performance. The whole entire loop kicks off right here with this one trigger. It's that moment the world signals that your authentic self isn't welcome. Maybe it was a parent saying, "Big kids don't cry," or a boss who only seems to value agreement, or a group of friends that makes fun of vulnerability. Your brain logs all of this as conditional acceptance. You get connection, sure, but only if you conform. And that becomes the deep-seated belief that your true self is just not safe to reveal. Okay, let's walk through this loop together. Step 1, the trigger fires. A situation comes up where you have to perform. Step 2, your false self kicks into gear. This takes huge amounts of emotional labor. You're constantly scanning the room for cues, which is a state called hyper-vigilance, all while you're actively pushing down your real feelings. Step 3, you perform successfully. The mask works.
You avoid a conflict, you don't get rejected, and you secure that temporary feeling of belonging. Now, step 4. This is the really crucial part. You feel exhausted from all that effort. That's ego depletion. But because you successfully avoided the pain of rejection, your brain gets a powerful hit of negative reinforcement. It basically learns, wow, that was costly, but hey, it worked, the mask keeps us safe. And just like that, the loop is locked in, ready to run all over again.
Right about now, you might be thinking, this sounds unbelievably inefficient and just exhausting. Why on earth would my brain choose this strategy? Well, the answer lies in your brain's most fundamental priorities, which are wired for survival above absolutely everything else. This is it. This is the key. To your primal brain, social rejection is basically the same as a death threat. I mean, think about it. Our ancestors depended on their tribe for survival. Getting cast out was a literal death sentence. Your brain is still running that ancient software, so it will prioritize avoiding the excruciating pain of social rejection above almost anything else, including your own long-term well-being, your energy, and your authenticity. So here's exactly what's happening in your brain. Your prefrontal cortex uses what scientists call top-down control to suppress your real emotions. And the entire goal of this super energy-intensive process is to avoid lighting up a specific part of the brain called the DACC, which is where you process social pain, you know, that physical sting of rejection. So when the mask successfully keeps the DACC quiet, the brain chalks it up as a win. And a really powerful lesson gets learned and reinforced every single time. Inauthenticity equals safety. The huge energy cost is just seen as a worthwhile price for survival. Okay, so we get the mask, we get its cost, and we understand the loop that powers it. And that understanding is powerful, but it's not enough. So now we're going to shift into application. How do we actually begin to dismantle this outdated defense system and safely, carefully reintroduce our true self to the world? The first step, like with so many things, is awareness. You can't change a system that you can't see. So we have to start by making the invisible cost of the mask visible and turn that vague feeling of exhaustion into some cold, hard data. This tool is called the cost audit, and it's pretty simple. For just 1 week, I want you to become a detective of your own behavior. Just notice the situations where your mask is the most active. What's the false self-behavior you tend to default to? And then, the important part, rate the ego depletion tax it charges you on a scale of 1 to 10. How drained do you feel afterward? This simple act of tracking makes the abstract cost real, and it gives you a clear map of exactly where all your precious energy is going. So once you've mapped out where and when the mask shows up, the next step is to start gathering some new data. See, your brain currently believes that authenticity is dangerous. We need to run some small, totally safe experiments to prove it wrong. We call this strategy microdose authenticity. The key here is to pick a minimum viable action, an act of authenticity so small that it actually bypasses your brain's fear response. This could be as simple as stating a genuine preference that's different from the group, like, hey, how about we try that new restaurant instead? Or it could be expressing one vulnerable feeling to a partner you really trust. It could even just be writing your honest thoughts down in a private journal. See, every time you do one of these things and the world doesn't end, you give your brain powerful new data that contradicts its old, outdated beliefs. You're slowly, safely teaching it that being authentic can actually be okay. And all of this leads to the final and honestly, the most crucial step. The reason the mask has so much power over us is because our self-worth is so often tied to what other people think. The ultimate goal here is to break that link and build our value from the inside out. This is all about building what's called non-conditional self-worth. It means you are systematically rewiring your brain to get your sense of value from internal things that you can actually control, like your effort, your consistency, your courage, your curiosity. So when you get praise or you get criticism, you can consciously use a mantra like this one. You acknowledge the feedback, sure, but you reaffirm to yourself that your worth is not dependent on it. This uncouples your value from the unpredictable reactions of other people, which in the end is what starves the false self of all its power. So we've journeyed through the problem, the mechanism, and the solution. But I really want to leave you with one final powerful reframe of the very struggle that might have brought you here in the first place. Just let that sink in for a second. Your burnout is not a sign of failure. It is not evidence that you're inadequate. It is the receipt. It is proof of the incredible, high-energy work you have been doing for years, maybe even decades, to protect yourself. It's the measure of a survival strategy that was, for a time, a profound success, but its season may be coming to an end. You know, the great irony here is that the very mask you built to protect yourself is now the thing preventing you from being truly seen and connected to others. The ultimate act of self-protection is no longer about hiding. It's about the courageous, gradual, and life-giving decision to finally show up as yourself.